Hello, welcome to About Time with me, Chris Nichols. This is the final episode, the bonus episode of Series 1. And just like the start, we're finishing in the same way. I'm delighted that I have my longtime partner and collaborator, Philippa Hardman, here. And we're going to reflect on the movies. We're to celebrate the release of the film The Salt Path, which is out this very week in early June, and to reflect on the link between that and a long walk I took in 2016, and use that to tie together some of the themes that have been running through this series. But first of all, Philippa, welcome back.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, and it's brilliant that you've already got so many podcasts in the can, so to speak, and now very professional with all the recordings. So it's fantastic. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to be talking with you about your walk, because I know how important it was for you back in 2016, and I know what led up to it. So I'm really pleased that we're able to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and by, coincidence, today I've been recording. I was delighted to do a recording with Kai Peters, who's the CEO of Ashridge through quite a lot of my time there, the majority of my time there. And we were reflecting in that on, the need for change and endings and this kind of thing. And, it was leaving Ashridge that caused me to go on a long walk.
So before we get on to the walk itself, I mean, I suppose the Salt Path, because that is the walk you did.
Yes, it's the south. Well, do you know it's the Salt Path has become so famous that the Southwest Coast Path now quite likes calling itself the Salt Path, but it is the Southwest Coastal Path. Yeah.
And obviously, I guess the release of the film, which we've both seen, has brought back a lot of memories for you. And so, what was your reaction to the film to begin with? Did you sit there going, "Oh no, that's not the right direction,"
Well, yes, I did, but
when you know something
yeah,
very
yes, I
well?
did. I mean, they definitely walked the wrong way at least in two scenes of the film, but it doesn't matter. And my reaction to the film was actually really, really well done. I mean, it was, it. I was extraordinarily reluctant when I first heard the film was coming out because I had great difficulty reading the book. The book came out much closer to the time of my walk, and Ray and Moth Winn's walk on the Salt Path was not my walk. It was very different. Their experience was different, their reason for walking was different, and their outcomes were different. And I kind of fought a bit with that and thought, no, I can't read this book, even though it's really, really popular. The film, it's 10 years since I did the walk, 10 years since my trauma, and I could watch it and enjoy it. It was a lovely piece of filmmaking.
Yeah, it was. It was beautifully filmed. Windy the whole time, I
Oh, well, that's
noticed.
true.
So,
That's just true.
when you walked, so nearly 10 years ago, why don't you just say a bit about why you walked?
Yeah, it was really simple. I mean, um, I had been part of Ashridge Business School, consulting, the whole thing. Done many, many things there. Been on the uh, sales director, on the leadership team, all kinds of things. And I'd done that for years. I'd been there 15 years. And as you know from your experience of working with me, um, when I do something that I really love, it tends to run through my very bones. It becomes part of who I am, and in a way that you often thought was a bit funny because you said, no, 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 it's a job. I said, oh, no, it isn't just a job. Yeah. And when there was a change of ownership, there was a change of culture, and I just didn't fit. The place that ran through my bones just no longer was. And it wasn't that I disagreed with the leadership particularly. It wasn't that I thought, oh, this was a terrible thing. It just didn't fit
Mm,
anymore. It was like a spiritual gulf opened up. And I found that enormously difficult. And
mm,
I experienced a kind of loss of hope, a loss of something I'd invested a lot in because I wasn't well paid there. I wasn't there for the money. I was there because it was an educational charity and I loved the work. And fundamentally, that contract shifted, and I lost my faith in the work I was doing at that time. I actually lost the place and I didn't become an associate. I left kind of cold turkey. I
Mm.
couldn't teach the MSc that was part way through. I mean, I really, really left. And in some ways, there was a destruction of something, of the human connection and the love that had been
Mm.
important to me, that just went poof. And there was nothing in its place. And we knew that we were setting up our company, Game Shift, full time. And I also knew that there was no way that I could go into the new thing carrying that sense of grief and loss and trauma and loss of faith in humanity and the work. I can't go into a new thing carrying that, so I had to do something. And I thought, pilgrimage. And I thought about the Camino. And then I thought, I cannot be bothered to go all the way to Spain to do a walk and a Jubilee year where it was going to be busy on the Camino. And I thought, I have a really long walk that's beautiful that I've always wanted to do right here. It's hillier than the Camino, but I'll do it anyway.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about it because I was very excited about the start of Game Shift, and in many respects, it felt like I was really aware that you were excited too, but this thing had to be undertaken, to because I'd always said Ashford went through you like a stick of rock. It went through, if you could split you open, Ashford would be there at the time. And I think it was really necessary as a symbol, really, of an ending and a transition and a healing, as you said.
It was like bridges transitions. There had to be a transition that there had not been. There'd been an ending that wasn't a proper ending; it was just a brutal ending, and there was a start that was exciting, and there had to be a transition. Otherwise, I would have muddled it completely.
So why don't you say a bit about what you actually did? Because I imagine that people might think you did it in one long, sort of 1 20-day chunk, but obviously you didn't. You took a number of months over it.
Oh, that that would be astonishingly fast.
Oh, would it? Okay.
20 days. Oh my God, if I could do it in 20 days, I'd be, that is serious athleticism. Most people take 42. I was gentler than that. I took near 50, and I didn't do it as a through walk. I didn't even do it as a linear walk. I still worked through that period. I tended to walk for 4 days and allow myself 3 days, or walk for 5 and allow myself 2 days of attending to work. And you described me at the time to clients and to others as a professional walker with an occasional work habit. I
I
remember.
do remember. I do remember that, and I remember
Yeah.
you starting actually not on the walk, but where you were born at Paignton Hospital.
It was important for me to start at the door of Paignton Hospital, which is a community hospital in the middle of Paignton, where in 1960, when I was born, it was still possible to be born there. I think you can only die there now.
Good. Well, I'm glad you didn't go there to do that.
Yeah.
Um, So when you walked, because I remember you and I talking about me coming to walk some of it with you, and you were talking about walking with other people, and then rather brutally, my invitation was kind of rescinded, um, and suddenly you weren't inviting people to come and walk with you. So, kind of what happened? Since I know it wasn't just me,
I didn't have enough breath.
it was a
It's
lot of up and downs.
Oh, I have walked the coast path. I'm a Devon boy. I have walked and run that path since I was a child. I have a clear memory of running the Paignton to Brixton session at a sprint as a kid. That was not going to happen in my mid-50s. So partly I realised it was going to be hard, and some of the people I wanted to talk to wouldn't have wanted to walk with me. And the other thing was, and this is going to sound a bit ethereal or spiritual, um, I always planned to walk the first 5 or 6 days on my own while I was getting the feel for it, and then I was going to invite people. And I can remember exactly where this happened. I'd left the Ness at Teignmouth, which is a big hill. I'd gone down to the bottom of the valley, gone up a hysterically big slope, and then was going down some painfully steep steps. And as I went up the next set, I realised that the path had other plans for me. The path did not want me to walk this with people and did not want me to have conversations while I went. It actually demanded that I paid respect to it in silence. So in fact, I walked in silence for all the walking hours of my day, usually 8 till 6 or something like that. I wasn't rude, so if somebody spoke to me, I spoke back, but I didn't seek out any interactions. And quite often I would take a detour not to interact. So I walked in silence for every day of the 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, as far as practically possible. And that wasn't my plan. That emerged out of the walking. The walking had its own demand, I think.
I think that's a lovely way of putting it. And I suppose that actually, ironically, these podcasts and the conversations you're having now, I suppose in a way, some, perhaps all of the people on the podcast might have been amongst your invitees.
Not all of them in quite the same way, and some of them I didn't know at the time and know now. But you're absolutely right. Clearly, I'm very slow at getting things done, and 10 years or 9 years on, I'm putting into effect the plan I started with back in like May 2016. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So say a bit about the walk then. Just, what do you really remember? What did you really notice about it?
God, it's a long way. No, I mean it's a very hilly 1,000 kilometer walk. It is spectacularly beautiful with some spectacularly dull bits, but it is mostly an awesome, amazing walk. And it is from cliff top to beach to cliff top to beach. I don't know how many steps. It's like 500,000 steps, as in steps cut into hills, staircase steps. There's a lot of steps and there's a lot of slopes. But the good news is you can do it. You can do it in small bits. Most people take 10 years. Damien Hall took 10 days. He went a bit quick for me. But most people take 10 years. I took a season. It was May to September.
Yeah. Okay. And I remember the weather being very figural in terms of, how it affected you, and because we had a conversation quite recently actually about weather and its impact on mood. But I remember you talking, and I remember seeing photos, and you showing me lots of photos, sending me lots of photos of beautiful days, beautiful cliff tops, as you say, but equally other days where you more or less couldn't see in front of your nose. What kind of impact did that have on you?
That's a really good point. So um, I, there were two patterns I noticed to start with. Or actually, only one I noticed to start with. The first pattern I noticed was I was avoiding people. And that wasn't just the silence. It was I walked from Paignton Hospital to Paignton Seafront and immediately turned from Paignton Harbour away from the town. And I noticed my mood shift as I turned away from the town. And I think this was down to my loss of hope, loss of faith in humanity. I actively felt drawn to be away from people, away from the crowd. And I gained energy the wilder it got, the more isolated it got, the further away from phone signal I got, the better it was. So that was the first thing. And after about 10 days, I had a great start weather-wise. It was mostly sunny, occasional drizzle, but fine. Second or third week in, so doing 3 or 4 days, so probably 9, 10 days of walking, I was in a bit of Cornwall, because I didn't do it in a linear way. I went to different places. And I was on the North Cornish coast, and for that whole chunk, the weather was vile. The cloud was just on the hilltop. I was walking through all the mine works at like Givor and going down that piece of coast, the big engine houses on the cliffs, and I couldn't see them until I got to them. They just loomed. And I became incredibly conscious of the difference between expansive, open, big horizon days and mist days. And I actively resisted the mist days because it pushed me inwards, which was exactly where I didn't want to go. So it was very easy to go, oh, lovely view, another awesome view, and look, an awesome view. Very different when it was drizzle, mist, step, step. Can't see anything. I could hear the sea and seabirds, but it was just in. And that was very hard, but it was the work I needed to do. I didn't like it.
So do you think if the weather had been fabulous the whole way round, you wouldn't have done the work as you've just described it?
Who knows?
Would you be having to do it now?
I'd just have to go again, wouldn't I?
I guess so.
I don't know. But fortunately, there's no way you're going to get around a walk around Devon and Cornwall without it being misty or raining, no matter when you do it. So it's good. It's going to be misty at some point, folks.
So to go back to your phrase, the path was making you do the work. It had other plans for you.
The path.
So were there other things that you noticed?
So I suppose that I always noticed the sea, the coast, the ruggedness, the wildness, and I didn't rush through that. I took lots of photos, and I think many of those I shared with you and Game Shift people, and many of those I put on various blogs. And I wrote a piece about I can't even remember what it was called, but it was Walking from Despair to Hope or something like that, which was very photographic. So I noticed the beauty and the wildness, and I was lucky to be walking from May into the summer, so there were wildflowers, and that changed as I went along, and I noticed the seasonal changes. And I also noticed that as it got towards summer, it got much, much busier. The coast path, especially in some of the tourist areas, gets busy. But then I noticed, I started to notice other things, so things I'd call sort of deeper patterns about it, which is where I think I come back to this series and I start to notice some of the patterns, because in this series I'm not noticing an aversion to people. This series is not about running away from people. It's not about turning my back on the possibility of society. I had to go find that again. And what I noticed on the path was actually once I'd gone far enough away, I could start coming back and noticing the people doing brilliant things. So the simplest level, the path is full of tiny little artisan businesses cropping up in little places selling coffee from horse boxes or the back of a converted Citroen van or whatever. These micro businesses doing local stuff with so much love, and it's just brilliant. Coffee providers of the Southwest Coast Path, I salute you. I have a serious coffee habit, and surprisingly, even in very remote places, like you get to the bottom of the hardest bit of the path around Port Quinn, and there's a coffee thing in a van. Brilliant.
Game Shift remembers with great fondness your coffee habit round the path.
Yes, yeah. But I also noticed, this is not linear in time, a couple who were carrying enormous boxes. They were, big, like a double bass and a guitar case and another box, and they were carrying instruments. And I said, "What on earth are you doing?" And they said, "Oh, we're going to play music on a headland," and it was 4 miles away or something, 3 miles away, for our friend's engagement. We're meeting on a headland to do a musical celebration of an engagement. And I thought, that's a bloody amazing. These people carrying really heavy kit 4 miles on the coast path to play for to celebrate friends' love. I thought it was just brilliant,
That's real
and it was
friendship.
full of things like that. There was another one that just sticks with me to this day is on the Lizard. There was an area of path um, where the grass was really long, and there was a sign from the National Trust on it saying, please bear with us, the grass is very long, we haven't cut the path for the benefit of glowworms. And I just love that sometimes humanity, this species that can do so much destruction of things, can also be the same species that doesn't cut the grass so that the glowworms are okay.
That's lovely. I imagine you had to take one of potentially many detours. Did you end up getting lost on the path?
Well, the good thing about the Southwest Coast Path is if you're walking, you just remember which direction you're walking, which the makers of the film didn't remember. You just remember which direction you're walking and you keep the sea to that side. So if you're walking towards, you know, from Minehead towards Land's End, you keep the sea on your right. And pretty much you can't get lost. You follow the path with the sea on your right. There are times in the mist where the path does go round things, around military bases or around private mine workings, and you have to find the path, the right thing. You can get lost. I have the Ordnance Survey app, other mapping apps are available, and if you have that and your Ordnance Survey map, even if you can't see a thing, you're not going to go far wrong. Just don't fall over the damn cliff, which people manage to do every year. And the film shows how that happens, actually. It's in bad visibility, you can do it. The place that I used to go wrong more than anything else was in woodlands, where multiple paths meet or separate in woodlands, and in towns where it's not always well signposted. And, I tended to rush through towns and probably just didn't see the sign because I was rushing, didn't,
Yeah.
didn't
And as
linger.
and as you came towards the end of the path, so not in a linear way, um, and whichever bit you were finishing at, how did you find that? Because I remember I have a sense that you were quite trepidatious about it.
What, the ending itself?
Yes, the
I
no
don't,
the no longer walking.
oh, well, hmm. I suppose I've got a couple of things to say before I get to that, but they're part of that. So let me half answer it and then come
Go
back
for
to
it.
it. I don't think I've ended with the coast path. I think I finished that walk. That I decided was different to ending. I think there's a difference between finishing something and really being done with it. Yeah, the path and I have a relationship that started long before I walked it. It started as a child. Who knows? I may yet peg out on it. I don't think I'm done. The path and I are not done. That's one thing. I didn't actually want to complete the walk. Um, I toyed with the idea of not completing deliberately, but I ended up touching the marker. Went from Minehead t'other way, so finished it over Pool Way, touched the sign there and thought, well, that's done. And there's all kinds of ceremonies you can do in the office at the end, the Coast Path office. You can get your name engraved in all kinds of things. I just didn't bother because I thought I'll be back. I'll be doing this again. Um, that was one thing. But also, there's something, um, uh, there's something in the way in Buddhism, which I was already engaged in mindfulness. This walk was part of my deepening of a secular Buddhist practice, which has gone on deepening for the 10 years since. There was something about this path as a learning, as a teaching guide, as a, this path was the path for me, with lots of obstacles and things to accept as is, be curious about, notice my own reaction to, and transcend. And it does that spectacularly well. It also, I think, brought out for me which I had lost the light and dark of humanity and the light and dark of myself. In my grief and trauma, I didn't behave in ways that I aspired to behave. I'd often, I think, acted smaller than I would aspire to, smaller than I am at my best. And I learned a lot from walking in the mist with that for quite a long time, yeah, particularly on those dark days. Um, and it kind of brought me back into a right relationship with the light and dark. And, I'm struck just how much this runs. These themes run through Jeff Mead's podcast, Michael's conversation, Helen's conversations, Helena Clayton's conversations, and today's Steve Clark's conversation. These themes run all the way through. And then the other thing that was just obvious, the path just kind of shrieks this, is flux. It's all in flux. It's a lesson in letting go. The path is a path of eternal flux, from the coast that is continually being eaten by a sea that's never the same, in weather that changes every 5 minutes, past mining industries that were thriving 100, 200 years ago, gone, tourist attractions, um, the really flat tarmac bit around, can't even remember where it is, Biddisford and Barnstaple, flat, because it's an ex-railway. The ex-Docks Railway at Instow, now beautiful signal box that's been converted into a tourist attraction, lovely gardens around it. Railway that's a path, signal box that's essentially a flower garden. All these boats, derelict, disused boats that have been turned into houses that people are living in. We're such an ingenious species. Flux, change, changing identities everywhere you look.
That's really lovely. Now I think we're coming towards the end of our time together here. So is there anything else you want to sort of any other thoughts or noticings or patterns or linking it to the podcast, your podcast series about time in any way?
Well, I think I can link it. I think everybody's probably got the message that I at least could weave a thread through the walk to every single one of the podcast episodes, some more than others. And if I was to link to one above all, I would certainly link to Michael Chaskalson's one and his new work on From Mindfulness to Wakefulness. The idea of awakening not being a spiritual thing where you sit on a cushion for 30 years and get some kind of supernatural awakening. It's a natural human neurophysiological state of noticing and really noticing something and noticing a shift in something and noticing what is and just letting it be. And I think the path is brilliant for that. And that runs, to me, that runs through all these podcasts. So that's one thing, the path as an agent of awakening. But I think every one of the podcasts has something to say about the human condition, the changing of a story, the care for others, the noticing the glories and wonders of love and humanity. And everybody on this podcast has played their part in telling that story. And I'm delighted to have had them as guests in series 1. And I'm just delighted that I have at least another 24 guests willing to come along. So we have a series 2 and a series 3. And like the path, I imagine that although I have a vague plan, I imagine the vague plan will not turn out exactly as I expect. And the path of these podcasts will have its own plan as well. And I will learn about it as we go.
And I imagine, Chris, as with always, that will happen, and you will get to new and unexpected outcomes, and new things will emerge, which will be brilliant. So I think it's probably down to me to say, well, Chris Nichols, thank you very much. No, let me do my hostly bit.
Thank you for letting.
Oh, you're meant to be the
No,
host.
no. I want you to host it. Thank you for letting me come on my podcast. But your turn to close it.
I'm going to close it. I wanted to open it, viewers and listeners, but he wouldn't let me. So I am going to close it. But it's just been a delight, and it's been. I know it was a really, really painful episode for you, and it was genuinely very traumatic, emotionally for you. So I'm just delighted that we've been able to revisit it 10 years on with that sense of perspective, and that now, despite the transgressions of the filmmakers in terms of not filming it in entirely the right order and pattern, that the Salt Path has brought such a lovely memory to you.
How did they take 192 miles to get to Clovelly? I don't know.
So that's another podcast entirely. So I think we ought to stop here before you get too cross with the filmmakers.
It was a lovely film. I recommend it.
Beautiful film. Yeah, I recommend it too.
Philippa, thank you.
Not at all. It's been a delight.